Alright, so now we'll take a look at this documentation resource. Let me click on this. Okay, so there is some tags there in the documentation resource, but before we do some modifications, get into the some theoretical part of this documentation. So the first question that comes up is, what is this documentation resource? So it's simple, huh? We prepare the documents to make others understand about our implementation. So whatever logic you put in your component bundle, if you want, you can prepare a documentation for that in the documentation resource. Okay, so two things we do. We prepare the documentation. And we view the documentation. Okay, so now we'll see how to prepare the documentation, and then we'll see how to view the documentation. Just to give you a brief idea, to view the documentation, you need to hit an URL, and there you'll find the documentation for your component. Okay, we'll focus on this later. First, we'll talk about how to prepare the documentation. Okay, how to do that. So for that, you need to go to your documentation resource in your component bundle. In this documentation resource, you'll find 3 tags. The first tag is in the Aura namespace, Aura documentation. Okay, see, the first tag, the outermost one, is Aura documentation. So this is the top level tag for the documentation resource. Within this tag we have Aura description and Aura example. The third one is Aura example. Okay, and then your Aura documentation tag closed. So now in Aura description, you can describe your component. Okay, and for that you can use you may use HTML, or you can also paste your code over there, but this code should be pasted within pre-tag. Okay, so you can you have to basically describe your component. You can use HTML for that, or you may also paste your code directly over there. But please remember, if you want to paste your code there, paste that code within this pre-tag, and also whatever tag you entered within this pre-tag, it should be escaped. Okay, in the escaped form. Okay, now what is escaped form? So that is simple. Let's say this, if you paste Aura component, since your components code start with Aura component, this is the high level tag for component resource in the component bundle. So if you paste this aura component within the pre-tag, you need to paste that in the escaped format. So what you're going to use, this is the normal format. In the escaped format, and lt aura semicolon aura component and gt colon. So basically in the escaped form, it has been this curly bracket is replaced by NLT, and it's the other one is replaced by NGT. So aura description we use to describe our component, and we can use HTML there. We can also paste the code there, and whatever code we paste, it should be in the escaped form. All right, let's keep the things simple for now. Okay, so this is the documentation resource. Let me give some HTML over here within this description tag. So let's say this is the form. I have this is the form for students to enroll themselves for classes in XYZ location. Cool. Okay, so next we have to look at this aura example. So aura example is for, we use this tag for demonstration purpose. We basically talk about how the component is used. Okay, so you may have text plus you may have visual output, and this visual output is interactive. Now what is this visual output I'm talking about? This is nothing but your component. Okay, it might not be clear right now. It might not be clear to you right now. So I just repeat, aura example, we use it for demonstration purpose. Okay, there you can add some text, plus you can refer a component, and that component would be there in your documentation as a visual output plus interactive output. Okay, so basically when you define this aura example tag, each aura example tag has name for this tag, say my example 1, reference, which is basically nothing but the name of the component followed by the namespace and then the name of the component. So our namespace is C and then the name of the component. So the name of the component is registration component. Okay, so this aura example has this tag has its name, and this aura example is referring to this component. Now as a visual output, this component will be previewed. Okay, and it would be interactive as well. Well, see this. And the third one is label. So this label is displayed as text. Like we can have my registration form. My registration form for XYZ location. Okay, you may have multiple examples. You may have multiple Aura examples in your documentation with a different name referring to the different component and with a different label. So this is all about the theoretical part of the documentation resource, where you have one top level tag Aura documentation. Within this Aura documentation, you have two tags, Aura description and Aura example. Aura description you use to describe your component, which you can do with the help of HTML markup language, or you may also paste your code in there. That should be in the escaped form. The next tag that you can use within Aura documentation is Aura example. In Aura example, basically you do the demonstration, you show how the component is used. Text is allowed, and this text, basically I should say HTML markup is allowed. Within this tag you can use HTML markup, and visual output of your component would be there. Also that preview would be interactive. And how to refer to the component? For that, when you describe this Aura example tag, when you define this Aura example tag, that time you give a name to your tag, you give the reference to the component, and also a label. Within this Aura example tag, you can again have some text in HTML format. Okay, using HTML markup, you can have your text over here. All right.